Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're exploring, well, a really agonizing moral puzzle. How one simple, unexpected act of kindness can boomerang back years later. But not as a reward, more like the most complicated dilemma you could possibly imagine for a mother.
Yeah, it's a tough one. We're diving deep into this powerful narrative called Le Passé Revenu, Fatma, Nora et les Filles. And the source material, it's structured almost like a classic tragedy, really. It forces you to look at these three central characters who are just locked into the situation.
A situation where the choice is basically between revealing a painful past truth or protecting happiness in the present and future.
Exactly. So our mission here is to kind of trace the path of trust, how it's built up, through real compassion, then shattered, maybe out of necessity, and finally, well, resurrected through this incredible, painful sacrifice. We really want to get at the why behind this impossible choice Fatma has to make.
Okay, so let's start unpacking this with Fatma herself. She's the protagonist, and her life, before all this chaos, it sounds like it was incredibly structured. The sources describe her as not just successful, high-level working, but someone whose whole life was calculated like a precise clock.
Yeah, that precision, that control, it's really key to understanding what happens later, her vulnerability. Her whole measured life, it suggests this deep need for order, maybe almost like a shield against, the messiness of the world.
And part of that ordered routine involved driving past the same spot every day.
Right, the main traffic light.
Yeah.
And seeing the same sight, this little girl, Nora, begging, she was this predictable disturbance in Fatma's otherwise clockwork existence.
Fatma would sometimes give money, but kept it very transactional, distant, right? But the source highlights this one specific rainy day where that barrier just broke. What was it about that moment? What made her completely break her own rules?
Well, it seems like it was the sheer visibility of need, raw need. The source says Fatma saw Nora shivering in a way that made her break all her established rules. It wasn't just about charity anymore. It was like her own carefully constructed order just crumbled emotionally in that moment.
Wow.
So she stops her expensive car, probably ignoring the rain, her nice coat, her shiny shoes, and steps right into the kind of mess she usually avoided. It wasn't just kindness. It was Fatma kind of letting go of her guarded self, even if just for a moment.
And Nora's reaction to this sudden kindness, it says so much, doesn't it?
Yeah.
About where they both stood. Fatma approaches, offers help, and Nora doesn't look relieved. She looks terrified. The source says, as if Fatma were wearing a bright mask against a dark background. She actually tries to pull away.
Yeah, well, she was street smart, hardened. For a kid like Nora, that kind of sudden, overwhelming kindness, it can honestly be scarier than the hardship she's used to. Because it asks for a vulnerability she probably felt she couldn't afford. She likely suspected, that there was a catch, a price to pay eventually.
So Fatma had to be careful how she approached it.
Very. She had to dismantle that suspicion patiently.
And her offer was quite specific, quite deliberate. She insists, no, Nora, you are not okay. Offers the basics, warmth, food, but then she frames it as just for one night. Makes it feel less overwhelming, maybe. Safer.
Exactly. Temporary. Less commitment, less risk for Nora. And then she adds that clincher. Her house was big. She had nothing to lose by caring for her.
Ah, that's interesting. Nothing to lose.
Right. It positions Fatma as totally secure, having a surplus of safety and comfort to give away. It wasn't a transaction. It was presented as purely an offer. And after what the source calls bare hesitation, Nora finally agrees. And what followed, well, it was a huge shift.
Yeah, the next 2 years sound almost idyllic in a way. The source talks about this really beautiful, though, unconventional mother-daughter dynamic forming. Fatma deliberately chooses not to dig into Nora's past.
Right. She focuses entirely on the present, on growth, teaching her to read, to write, treating her, as the source says, like the daughter she never had. She literally watched Nora flourish and grow. It really looked like love could maybe rewrite history.
But could it really? Or was it just covering it up?
Well, that's the analytical question, isn't it? It definitely conquered some history, or seemed to. But was Fatma truly just nurturing Nora? Or was she also, maybe unconsciously, trying to prove that her kind of controlled compassion could engineer a perfect outcome, fix things?
Impose her order onto this chaos.
Sort of, yeah. The source kind of hints that Fatma poured her own need for control, for perfection maybe, into raising Nora. But underneath that flourishing surface, the actual trauma, the reason Nora was on the street in the first place, that was never really dealt with, just pushed down.
Suppressed.
Exactly. And that unresolved past, that's what makes the next part so utterly crushing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because this period of, apparent harmony, It doesn't end with a conversation or a transition. It
Yeah.
ends with disappearance.
Yeah.
Fatma comes home from work one day, house is empty, Nora's just gone.
Vanished. And the final blow, the really sharp point of it, comes when Fatma checks her closet. This old wooden box where she kept her savings, empty, cleaned out.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is where Fatma's whole vision just collapses. The source is really clear. The pain wasn't primarily about the money itself. It was, and I quote, a stab in the trust. It was this deep existential wound.
Because her love hadn't fixed things.
Right. She felt her love hadn't been restorative after all, but maybe just the price of Nora's escape. Her attempt to bring order and love into this girl's life had, from her perspective, totally failed.
That's a brutal realization. And yet Fatma makes this really astonishing choice next.
Right.
She decides not to look for Nora, doesn't report the theft. This isn't just passive acceptance, is it? It feels like something more active.
It really is. It's almost like a defense mechanism, but wrapped up in a kind of retroactive mercy. Fatma chooses to reframe the theft. She decides the money must have been Nora's desperate means of survival, her way to stay alive.
So she turns the betrayal into something understandable, almost necessary for Nora.
Precisely. She kind of rationalizes it as a brutal but maybe necessary bid for freedom or autonomy on Nora's part. And making that choice, framing it that way, allows Fatma herself to move on. To bury the pain of the lost money, yes, but maybe more importantly, the pain of the lost daughter figure. It's like forgiveness through distance and through reinterpretation.
And choosing to bury it like that, to not pursue it, that's what sets the stage for the final, almost inevitable collision, isn't it? Years go by, Fatma's actual son,
Khalid.
her only son,
Yeah.
who's been studying and working overseas this whole time, completely unaware Nora ever existed, he calls. He's coming home, and he's getting married.
And you just know, reading this, the universe has this cruel sense of timing, doesn't it? Fatma thought she'd sealed off that chapter, that painful history. But the source makes it pretty clear. History isn't neat, it doesn't stay sealed, it just waits.
Waits for the worst possible moment to reappear.
Pretty much. Khalid's happy news, his return, it unwittingly sets the perfect trap.
So the stage is set. The impossible return. The confrontation. Khalid arrives. The source describes him as smiling like the sun and standing next to him. His bride. This beautiful young woman.
Who is, of course.
Nora, the ghost from Fatma's past, resurrected.
And the impact on Fatma is described as instant. Physical. She recognizes her immediately. The years have passed. Nora's matured. She looks composed. Beautiful even. But the source points out her eyes. They hold the same fear, now amplified.
Amplified because the stakes are so much higher now.
Immensely higher. It's not just about her past catching up. It's about potentially destroying her entire present, her future, her marriage. And Fatma, her breath catches, her precise clockwork life just stops. All she can manage is one strangled word. Nora.
And chaos erupts. Khalid, completely oblivious, is just confused. How did you know her name, mother? And Nora, seeing her world about to implode, she actually collapses.
Yeah, just buckles and calls out to Fatma using the old name, the childhood name, Ya Auntie Fatma.
And that Auntie Fatma, that immediately confirms it for Fatma, doesn't it? Confirms Nora knows exactly who she is, confirms the full horror.
Absolutely, it seals it. And Fatma, for a moment, seems to almost ignore Khalid's confusion. She focuses right on Nora, the source of this renewed pain, speaks to her in what's described as a calm, painful tone, demanding to know why. Why come back like this?
And Nora's explanation is just tragic, really.
Utterly. She tearfully explained she had no idea Khalid was Fatma's son. She insists she ran all those years ago, not because she didn't value the kindness she says she could never forget it, but because she was terrified.
Terrified of what?
Terrified that if Fatma ever found out her full story, whatever secrets that entailed, Fatma would feel obligated to hand her over to the police. The theft, the running away. It was driven by fear of the past, of consequences. The money was just a tool, a desperate means to escape that potential outcome.
So the source puts Fatma in this absolutely impossible position.
Yeah.
A philosophical chokehold, you called it. She has, what, maybe seconds to decide? Weigh her own sense of justice, that old, deep wound against her son's entire future happiness.
It's brutal, and the narrative basically presents two paths, both destructive in their own way. Path one, expose Nora. Tell Khalid everything, the street life, the theft years ago, the fact that Nora's marriage is built on this huge omission.
Which would validate Fatma's own pain, deliver a kind of justice for the past betrayal?
Right. But it would absolutely destroy Khalid's life, end his marriage instantly, and probably damage her relationship with him forever, alienate him completely.
Okay, so that's path one. Path two.
Path two is radical forgiveness. Total silent forgiveness. Suppress her own truth, her own pain, her own history with Nora in order to preserve her son's happiness, his marriage, his future.
And this is where I think the source really pushes the definition of maternal love,
Mm.
beyond just affection, into something harder. Fatma chooses silence, she chooses wisdom, maybe, but it clearly comes at a huge personal cost. How does the source show her making that choice?
Well, it's not portrayed as this easy emotional outpouring. It's almost calculated again, but in a different way. A final act of imposing a kind of order on the chaos. She consciously decides to cover her own wound, her personal injury, with composure.
Composure, that word again.
Exactly. She physically puts her hand on Nora's shoulder, managing a smile described as sad yet satisfied. Sad, presumably because of the truth she now has to carry, the injustice she's swallowing, but satisfied because she knows she's chosen the path that protects her son, the greater, although harder, good.
And she doesn't just forgive Nora privately, does she? This is crucial. She publicly reframes who Nora is, specifically for Khalid's benefit. This feels like the absolute core of the story's insight.
It really is. She speaks the words of welcome to Nora. Welcome to our family, Nora. The past doesn't matter. What matters is the present and the future. What's past is buried. That's for Nora, but maybe also for herself.
A declaration.
Yes. But then she turns to Khalid. And this is the masterstroke, according to the narrative. She actively reframes Nora's past desperation, the very thing that led to the original betrayal, into a virtue. She tells Khalid he chose a woman who knows the value of a difficult life and knows how to make a new life for herself.
Wow,
Yeah.
that is profound. She's essentially rewriting Nora's history for her son, turning survival instinct into strength of character. She's giving Nora permission, in front of Khalid, to be worthy of his love, despite the secret hanging between the two women.
Exactly. She elevates Nora, and the source makes it very clear Nora understands the sheer magnitude of this gift, this sacrifice. She recognizes Fatma didn't just forgive. She actively chose motherhood, chose Khalid's happiness, over her own need for justice or revenge or even just emotional honesty.
So the new life Nora has built with Khalid, it's now grounded entirely on Fatma's choice, on her forgiveness and sacrifice. That's a heavy foundation.
The most complicated inheritance, you could say.
Yeah. This whole story is just a masterclass in looking at the immense personal pain someone, Fatma in this case, might willingly endure for someone they love, for their child's future. It suggests that maybe the highest form of virtue, at least in this narrative's view, isn't always about revealing the truth. Sometimes it's about the calculated silent suppression of your own justice.
Right. It argues that true forgiveness maybe isn't just saying the words, it's taking an action, often a painful one, to preserve something you value even more than your own sense of being wronged.
So thinking about this sacrifice, this complexity, Fatma uses that very deliberate phrase, what's past is buried. But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Forgiveness is powerful, absolutely.
Yeah.
But can suppressing such a huge truth, even for a good reason, like saving a marriage, keeping a family intact, ever really let the past stay buried?
That's the lingering question, isn't it? Because the weight of that secret, it doesn't just vanish into thin air. It feels like it transfers. It now exists unspoken in the space between Fatma and Nora. It becomes this hidden foundation, a secret shared only by them under the same roof.
So the burden shifts.
I think so. The immense weight of that silence, it moves from being about Fatma's original injury to being about Nora's constant, maybe fearful gratitude and her awareness of discovery, that secret, that unspoken truth. It's like this ripple effect that's going to shape the texture of their family life from here on out.
A truly complicated, maybe even beautiful inheritance indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back soon with more fascinating sources.